Thank you. And our safety minute. Kent, all right. Now go ahead.
Good morning. So as you're driving into work today, you may have noticed that the roads were a little slicker than they typically are, a little moisture falling on it. But as we approach some of our wetter and snowier parts of the year, it's important to keep in mind that slip, trips, and falls are a leading cause of accidents in the workplace and at home. Here at UTA, we experience a lot of slip and trip falls, especially in the month of December when there's lots of snow and people out there walking in some snowy conditions. So some of the things that we try and do here is we try and maintain good housekeeping, keep the aisleways and walkways clear so that people can pass through them without coming across obstructions. Another thing that we do is our facilities maintenance keeps ice melt in buckets near each of the doors so that if somebody sees a slippery condition in the parking lot or on the walkway, they can take immediate action and anyone can spread some ice melt down to get the ice melting. Another thing is to wear proper footwear when it's snowy outside. You know, maybe the pumps and the loafers can take the day off when it's snowy outside so that we can keep good footing underneath us so we don't slip. Another thing that we try and spread is maybe the shuffle walk. If you've ever seen that, where you kind of keep your feet together like you're walking on the ice rink. That way we can prevent some of the falls that we see on those icy conditions. So keep in mind as we hit this wetter, colder season that we're going to be seeing some ice and to be aware of slip, trips, and falls. Thank you.
The shuffle walk. I guess maybe we ought to all stand up and practice it now. I've seen it before. I have to admit, maybe at my age, I'm starting to start that practice. So thank you. Appreciate it. Public comment period. Karen, do we have any?
We do. We have a comment sheet from Claudia Johnson. We invite her to come up, and we really appreciate the public and their input. So thank you, Claudia, for taking the time to come talk with us.
I'm just sorry that more people aren't here on your advisory board. What I wanted to bring out is the fact that I'm from Salt Lake, and I do most of my transportation around Salt Lake, but I also go to other cities and the different counties. And what I've noticed is that people always complain about buses not pulling up to the curb, buses not this, buses not that. The problem is not the buses not wanting to get up there, the buses cannot get up there. And I've done some investigating within the UTA and found out it's not UTA's responsibility, but it is the communities that they are serving responsibility to paint the curbs to keep people from parking nearby. Down the street from me, as an example, 2 vehicles always park right there because here's the bus bench, and that's all the room that they get. And no bus, not even a car, can pull in there and park. So you're not making it accessible for UTA to be able to do the job which they need to do, and the bus drivers desire to do the best that they can to serve the public. But I think that the communities need to address that, to look at it. It's not being painted. They're not being painted. They're not being taken care of. They're not being groomed to allow the buses to do their job. And talking to them and coming to the board meetings, the desire is there to serve the people. And I know that that's the desire for you in your positions, is to serve your constituents and the people that you live with. So I'm just advocating the fact that please get out there and get those spaces painted to allow a bus to pull up, and they can't pull up and stop and nobody can get over the snow mound, which are going to start happening, and be able to get on the bus. So I'm just trying to make sure that UTA gets the credit that they deserve, and you're, as an advisory board, do what you need to do to help support them in what you can. Thank you.
Could I ask you, obviously you travel and get around.
Too much.
If you would be so inclined to maybe include that information in a written form, so as mayors and as representatives of our specific areas, we could utilize that information where you see where the buses don't have the space to park and stuff. And we'll take a look on our own, but if you have some detailed information or anything that would be helpful.
Personally, I don't think it's my responsibility as a citizen to
Yeah.
go out and say, this place, this place, this place. And for you, in your role, but you need to pass that on too, is to be able to say, we need to check these areas. And your maintenance crews do go down and go around and fill the potholes and do the debris striping on the streets and stuff that way. That can be just done as part of that maintenance that needs to happen. Is they also need to look at those
Yeah, we
curb structures.
will do
and stuff.
that. I just
But
wanted
yes,
to,
I just, because there's some people that aren't going to be here. And I realize that, but it just really frustrates me that I grew up and it was down the street and I never had to worry because it was always painted and it was always there. And gosh, buses could pull right on up and even peek around the corner to see that somebody's running down the street to get on the bus, and they'd wait.
thank you. Appreciate it. All right.
We could put her comments into a memo that can go out to all the
I
advisory
mean,
board members.
some of us aren't here today, and it might be helpful so they could read those. So.
We can just put her comments into a memo of today and then send that out to the advisory board.
I think it wouldn't take much to just send that to the mayors and the county councils of the different areas of the bus stops, just a reminder. Email out. All right, that's all the public comment that I'm aware of.
So let's go ahead and address the minutes of September 25th, 2019. If there are any additions, corrections, or discussion on those, now's the time.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the minutes.
I love it. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I think we're unanimous in that. Thank you. Carlton, I caught you right at the right moment. Sorry.
I was thinking something else was before mine, so I took the bite of my pickle. Bad decision on my
Those
part.
pickles are so good. I love those pickles.
And thank you for adjusting your typical meeting schedule. We are presenting jointly with UDOT at the 115 Transportation Interim Committee an update to the required study from Senate Bill 136 on whether UTA, the possibilities of UTA being a state entity. Just to update you, the consultant that we've jointly done, and UDOT is, the consultant technically is working under UDOT, but in strong collaboration with UTA, and they are doing a discovery phase right now and have a very broad group of individuals and expertise that they've interviewed, and there's a number of different analysis that they will have to do. Most of that work will be done in a second phase and will be ready to complete and give back to the legislature in the spring, probably late spring. So this is an update. A month ago, one of the other required studies from Senate Bill 136 was a study about the pension plan and what issues might exist if there was a transition to the Utah retirement system. And that study was presented to the same committee last month, and some important facts came out in that would show what the challenges would be in such a transition. I'm not sure if you've gotten a copy of that study yet, but there's a sheet that we've added to that, and at this point, we're not anticipating any action on the legislature's part. I think as a board, we feel like there's some fairly compelling reasons to not change the pension plan, and they're pretty comparable in price and also in cost. So, but we would be happy to get you any information there that you might be interested. Since the board adopted a fair policy, a general board policy with consultation from the local advisory council, we have been working on some revisions to the fair policy. It's been a number of years since that has taken place, trying to simplify and streamline that down. We had an additional presentation in our meeting just prior to this, and we're getting to a point where we're starting to put some meat on the bones, and I think staff is heading in a good direction. We would anticipate that being completed by early 2020, and there would be a fairly intense public process, and also informing you as a council and getting your feedback before any changes took place. But just know that that is in its process. We've asked as part of that, and really, almost really as a precursor to that, to look at a low-income program or past program that could address the very lowest of income folks who sometimes in a typical fare box scenario is fairly regressive. They can't afford a pass but end up paying full fare as they get on, and as opposed to one of our monthly pass holders. And we're hoping to find a mechanism and do a pilot that would address that issue. We think if we can address that issue, then the rest of the fare discussion becomes a much easier discussion, and also, more importantly, helps those who really are dependent on our service. So anyway, those works are in play, and we'll certainly come back to you and give you some update to that. We also approved about a month ago an agreement with the Central Wasatch Commission, who many of you probably are familiar with, but do work and look at issues in regards to the Central Wasatch. It's a joint effort that includes Summit County and Park City and the communities along the mouths of the canyons on the Wasatch Front to increase bus service of the canyons. This agreement will shift bus service from 78 weekday and 80 weekend to 114 trips a day. They are contributing about $60,000, and then the UTA would be making up the difference. It's facilitated in part by a couple significant things, but one of which is they had a stop that they were picking up on the red line a little bit to the west. I want to say it's the Bingham Junction stop, and that stop was eliminated. But they found that only 4% of the passengers were actually, originating there, and most of them were coming from cars and parking there. So they just have to go to one further stop. But that limiting that stop, it enabled them to turn buses around at a much faster pace. The other significant shift is they moved the park and ride lot off of Wasatch Boulevard there near the mouth of Little Cottonwood Canyon to our lot on 9400 South, and there's a lot more parking available there. It allows our buses to pull in out of the lot much easier, where on the previous lot they would sometimes sit for 15, 20 minutes trying to get out on heavy days of traffic. We're doing a heavy media information there, but we feel like that more frequent service should facilitate a better service to the canyons this season, which should begin here shortly.
So Carlton, can I ask you just a question
sure.
on that? You said that they're, what is it, 68,000 is what they're contributing?
I'm trying to remember, 60,000, yeah, 60,000.
And UTA is making up the difference.
Yeah.
Any idea what?
Yeah, it's about, if I remember right, it's about 90,000. 150 total. Yeah.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Thank you. Let's see. We just received notification today from our federal lobbying team and through Senator Romney's office that UTA was awarded a DOT grant for $3.2 million for bus and bus facility programs, and so we're grateful for that and that continued partnership with the FTA, and we're grateful to Carolyn and her staff and for all the work they have done in that regard. And then last but not least, and if I can maybe when Mayor Biskupski comes, we as a board have speaking of which, I'll let her put her things down here for a second.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, Mayor, welcome. And we, as a board, I've had the privilege from back in my city council days when Mayor Biskupski was a member of the legislature. She was always a friendly face and willing to hear my request out. And as we've had the pleasure of working with her over the years, and certainly in her role as mayor, and more particular on her role here in the local advisory council, we're appreciative of your public service and certainly your commitment to transit, and wanted to thank you. So I have a small gift that I'll get up and hand to you, but it's a necklace that includes one of our historic tokens from our original bus service, and a good reminder of the long history of transit in particular in our city here in Salt Lake. So thanks. That's my report.
Any questions for Carlton? Thank you, and good luck with your next meeting.
I have to leave early, I apologize.
It's just fine. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the agency report. Carolyn, will you take that forward, please?
Yes, so just Bob Biles, the CFO, will actually give an update and actually the results of our bond refunding and new money issuance. We actually completed that 2 weeks ago. We came to the advisory council previously to discuss it, so we'll have Bob give just an update on that.
So do you remember in September we came to the advisory board and talked about a potential $540 million bond issue. The designated officers worked with our financial team to monitor the markets. If you've watched the markets at all, they go up and they go down. And we actually ended up issuing $309,710,000, so significantly less than we had anticipated. You might remember there were 3 refunding/restructuring issues that we were looking at, and then 1 new money issue. So we did 2 of the refinancing restructuring. We did the 2012 5% coupon bonds. Those are the 2041, 2042 bonds, about $100 million that was due in those time periods. And so we refunded those. We had a 15% net present value savings on just that particular issue, amounted to $14,762,000 of net present value savings for the agency and the taxpayers. We also did the 2015 restructuring. That's the one where we were looking at 2027 to 2036, reducing the debt service in those years by about $10 million a year. A week before the issuance, that was a $9 million negative net present value savings. We challenged the financial team to come up with some solutions, and we ended up, and the rates came down, we ended up with about a $3 million net present value cost, which is where I think we talked to you about in that range. So we were able to accomplish that restructuring also. The restructuring refinancing we didn't do was the 2012 4% coupons. It didn't meet our criteria of 5% net present value. I think when we talked to you, it was 7.5%, but the rates went up from when we talked to you, and so that savings disappeared, so we just didn't do those. And then finally, the new money, the true interest costs on that about $71 million bond issue was 2.73%. So we still have a little time period to go. We actually close next Tuesday, but we did have a successful bond sale.
Keep it up. Let's get that cheaper money.
Well, as we told the board, excuse me, the bond resolution itself allowed the bonds to be issued in more than one series across different dates. So we haven't given up on the 4% 2012 bonds yet. We'll continue to monitor the market, and if those should come into the money, we'll gear up the financial team and see if we can sell bonds and accomplish the savings that we were hoping for with those bonds.
Comments or questions? Okay, thank you.
Okay, and the other item I want to talk about is the VIA, the microtransit project during launch event. And I'm going to have Jaron Robertson and Andrea Packer come up and talk about that. The launch is tomorrow. They will be at Draper Station at 3 p.m. And so we're hoping the public will come, you as well. There's some information there. I'm just going to have Jaron and Andrea really talk a little bit about what the project is. There's been some changes on the location, of the geographic area we're covering, and Andrea as well. We'll talk about the marketing and some of the promotions we'll be doing.
Good morning. My name is Jaron Robertson. I am Director of UTA's Office of Innovation we have here. We're tasked with identifying, performing research, and really looking how new and emerging technologies can really enhance the transportation system here and within our community. And let me let Andrea quickly introduce herself too.
Yes, for those, I'm Andrea Pecker. I am the the Communications Director here. So we've been working closely with Jaron's team and our partner VIA on the communications and marketing for this. So we're really excited. The service is actually beginning today, although the celebratory event is tomorrow. But this has really been a collaborative effort throughout the organization, led by Jaron and his team. So.
Yeah, so thank you, Andrea. Let me quickly give you an overview of the pilot and what we're doing. This is a really exciting week for UTA, our customers and the community in South Salt Lake Valley. What we're doing is we are launching an on-demand public transportation service, which allows any customer within the geographic service area to actually on demand using mobile phone technologies request and hail a UTA vehicle to come pick them up and drop them off anywhere within the service area. If you have this one-page brochure in front of you, let me quickly show you that service area, and I can kind of talk a little bit about the details of the service. In the bottom left-hand corner, that is the southern end of Salt Lake Valley. The blue area is the geographic service area we're talking about. That encompasses the cities of Bluffdale, Draper, Harriman, Riverton, and South Jordan. And so the northern boundary, you're also seeing that blue line, and that's 114 south. And then so again, you can see it goes basically through the south end of the valley. And so what we're talking about is if anyone is in this service area, they're eligible to use this on-demand technology and have UTA come pick them up and drop them off within our normal operating days and service hours. As part of the service, you can see there are 7 rail locations within this, 2 on our red line, 3 on the tracks blue line, and 2 front runner stations. So a big objective of this pilot is to help our customers connect into transit as part of that first and last mile solution. In addition to this, though, should a customer say, I just need local transportation service, they're eligible to actually move anywhere within the service area by using this service. So it's a really exciting new way for us to go out and pilot and test on-demand transportation. A quick note, this is a pilot, so we launched this week, but we'll be operating for the course of the year while we evaluate and test these types of services to see if this can be a successful solution for both UTA and our customers. Let me kind of quickly talk about some of the details of the service so you have a better understanding. We've partnered with a company called VIA. They are kind of a leader of on-demand shared ride-hailing services. So they have experience in operations across the country and for that fact across the world. They're available in New York, Washington, D.C., Chicago. They've partnered with LA Metro, King County Metro, and then they've also partnered with a couple cities across the community. What they do is their transportation as a service solution. So they're coming in and they're going to do the day-to-day operations for us. So they're bringing in the vehicles, the operators, they bring in that mobile phone technology and kind of administer and oversee the day-to-day operations. When we talk about the customer experience, when they want to use the service, it's available Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. as part of the pilot. We do put an emphasis on shared rides. So if you're using this service, you could expect that someone traveling in a similar location or going to a similar destination would be picked up along the way. We set parameters around that, so we don't really diminish that customer experience and put long waiting times for anyone who's on the vehicle. we provide what we call a corner-to-corner service. So with that, we may, once a person makes that trip request, they may have to walk a short distance to go meet that vehicle. And what that does is it really keeps operational efficiencies in check, and it really keeps people waiting on the vehicle from having to make long detours to pick other people up. This is typical for how they operate the service, and again, we set those parameters, so we have set a quarter-mile max walking distance, but we, in general, should expect people just have to walk a few hundred feet to meet the vehicle. And again, that on-demand technology will show those customers how to meet that vehicle and where at. I'll quickly move along. This is an accessible service, so anyone who may need a wheelchair accessible vehicle, they have the ability to make that request. And any of our customers who do make that request will actually have a door-to-door service, so they don't have to go meet the vehicle. The vehicle will go pick them up and drop them off at their pick-up and drop-off locations. One of the quick parameters is we look at the average wait time for when a customer meets the vehicle, and we've set that at about 15 minutes. So on average, once you make that trip, you can expect an average time of 15 minutes to be picked up. So it's really good service when you think about that customer experience. Just quickly moving along, using the mobile phone app. Again, customers make that trip request, and it does provide fare payment integration, vehicle tracking and notifications, and their their pickup and drop-off locations. But for any customer who may not have a smartphone, they're eligible to call in, and we can actually dispatch that trip for them. They can also pay a fare over the phone as part of the service. And then quickly moving on, the fares for this service, they're typical UTA fares. So right now, the base fare for this product is $250, reduced fares is half price, and customers are eligible to transfer to other modes. So as we talk about those first and last mile solutions, you use this to connect the tracks. It's good for a transfer as part of our normal transfer policies. So there's not additional fares. So it's really exciting that this is that first and last mile connection for the community. And let me let Andrea move on and talk about some of our marketing efforts.
And also with respect to the fares, you can you do need to book the trip within the VIA app or by calling, and you can pay within the VIA app. Also, other UTA fare media are accepted. So like those people who are on an employer pass program or on a school pass program or have a fare through our UTA Go Right app. Our other traditional fares will be accepted with a couple of exceptions because we don't have the electronic readers on there. So we will not accept cash on the vehicle and then our fare pay card. But we've really tried to integrate the fares within the rest of the system. And again, the same transfer rules apply as Jaron mentioned. You can transfer to or from a VIA trip with your UTA ticket or your fare purchase through VIA. So as Jaron mentioned, one of our focuses for this pilot is to really study whether it can complement our existing bus and rail services and provide those first and last mile solutions and provide service in areas in a more efficient way than running more traditional types of service. So from a communications and marketing standpoint, this has really been a co-branded effort between us and VIA, with us wanting to promote this as a UTA initiative, but it is a VIA service. We need to make it clear to customers that they need to go and use the VIA app. So this has really been a co-branding partnership with VIA. So the flyer you have in front of you is kind of really the look and feel for a lot of our communications efforts. They've kind of started trickling out over the last few days. We did a little social media as all of the vans were moved to the Draper structure, and we knew people would be seeing them and tweeting us, so we kind of tried to get ahead of that a little bit and have some fun. But we've worked on a very joint marketing program with VIA, where UTA is very focused on building the broad awareness of this new type of service, really educating people on what it is because it is new, and going through the details of how it works. And it's also just to build that community support and to study if people really kind of accept this and understand it, and communities want to pursue it. And we've had tremendous support from the mayors and the communities in this pilot area, and we're excited that there is growing interest in other areas. So we've really focused on that and are doing a lot of traditional and new media with newspaper ads, direct mail, a lot of online and mobile advertising. VIA's component of the marketing is really focused on the rider engagement. You know, that's the expertise that they have as they've done this in other markets. And so they will be doing a lot of digital and social. And they also have what they call a team of street ambassadors. So they will actually have people out at our rail stations and key destinations in the service area, handing out, you know, smaller flyers like this, and kind of, you know, catching people and educating them how to use the app. So if you're out in their area, you may see one of these street ambassadors. They'll be in their light blue jackets, helping to spread the word. We are kicking off the service with some promotions. So we are offering $1 on all rides within the VIA app. So when they go and book a trip in VIA, just the $1 fare for all rides will be in the app, and that will run through December 31st of this year. In addition, for new riders, or for as we market to, you know, potential past partners, we are offering a promotional offer of the first 2 rides are free. And so on some of these flyers like this, there will be different promotional codes. And we are doing different codes in different areas so we can track and get the data on where those are being used. So that's just kind of a little bit of how we're kind of kicking this off. There'll be a lot of communications activity for probably the first 3 or 4 months. And then we're kind of going to reassess and study the data. And we'll do some follow-up throughout the course of the pilot until next November. So happy to answer any questions you may have.
I've got one. Let's say that there is hypothetically an employer, perhaps in the service area, that makes Coca-Cola, and they have 900 employees that drive there every day. Have you engaged with tomorrow? Do we have Swires folks there to show their employees that there's a way to get from Front Runner to that plant?
I can't specifically say if they will be there tomorrow. We have done some communication with all of our past partners and they've all been invited to the event. We had an annual kind of partner appreciation breakfast recently where representatives came and Jaron made a similar presentation to them. So we're building awareness with current past partners. We've also worked with that group to target specific employers in this service area and do follow-up education and marketing. And then we will also be studying potential new past partners who aren't on a program yet and may be struggling with those first and last mile connections. So there is a lot of outreach and marketing opportunities specifically with past partners that
I'm
we'll
going
be
to make sure I
doing.
invite them because like I said, I went on a tour of the plant. I thought it was automated, but it still has 900 people that drive their car there. And all of them said they would use Front Runner, but the problem with where they're located in Front Runner, it's a separated. So this could really make a difference for them.
We will reach out to them.
Let's make sure they're there tomorrow for sure. What's that?
If they all arrive at the same time, yeah.
Well, I don't expect all of them will ride it, but you might get a couple hundred to do it.
We did have our first van sighting out today at a Harmon's out there, so the buzz is starting. We're excited.
So obviously, this isn't their first rodeo, VIA. I mean, they have different locations. What's the expectation? What do you anticipate, or what projections do you have based upon prior experience?
Yeah, so we went out earlier this year and did some simulation of how this service might perform. This isn't necessarily intended to be high-frequent service. There's many reasons why the area wouldn't necessarily warrant that. So we could project anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 trips per day. That would be common for a service like this as we looked across the country and how they perform. I think personally there's many factors that come into play where we could see higher ridership You know, we really have to understand and study that and say, as ridership continues to grow, if it does, you know, making sure this is the right type of service. It's not going to be effective if we're transporting thousands of riders per day on personal rides. We'd want to look to other modes. So this is really a coverage-based model, which allows us to be more dynamic and flexible when it talks about routing and picking up and dropping off passengers. And it really fits in well with the community, we believe. So again, I think we could expect anywhere around 1,000 to 2,000 passengers per day. That will take some time for us to get there. It's new, and we'll have to see as we get, and then we can continue to evaluate the data. I should note the vehicles we're using, they're smaller. They're 6-passenger vans. We have 16 of them out there that will be servicing the community.
Just curious, do you have 1,000 vans or do you have, 16? Okay.
Yeah, if we get to the 1,000 vans, we'll want to look at a different mode for the area.
It's almost like, I could see it catching on initially, because you're feeling like, oh, timeliness, quick, inexpensive, and it'll give you a measure of the interest, I guess, so.
Yeah.
I want to try it. You going to try it, Van? Or Troy? Go ahead, Karen.
I was just going to say, I've had some questions up in the Box Elder County area about this. They're looking at this and paying attention to how this pilot goes, so hope it goes well.
That's good to hear.
Okay.
I
Go
got
ahead,
one.
Troy.
What will they consider, what will be considered success? Like, is there a trip target number?
So, in addition to our qualitative or quantitative metrics, so we want to look at, can we put this service out there, reducing our cost per rider? When we look at the existing services with those flex routes, we would like to bring out that investment we put in per rider. Looking at daily ridership is another obviously big factor as part of this. And then also those qualitative metrics is the public and community's acceptance, and do they want and support these types of services? So we're looking at on both ends to making sure that we have a good idea of how this service performs and if it fits in well for the communities.
So if it picks up the flex route passengers that are currently out there, but at a lower cost, that will be one measure. And then if it catches on to people that wouldn't use flex, but will use this, that'll be sort of a combination measure. Is that what we're going to consider successful?
Precisely. We want to work with our current customers using those flex routes. As we're not making any modifications to those routes during the pilot, obviously if this works, we have to consider what the future of the service looks like down there. So it's important that our current customers get out and test out the service, as well as our efforts in recruiting new customers.
So the elephant in the room, why did you choose this area? Why was this the strategic launch of this versus some other location? Any particulars?
I would go back to looking at the performance of service in the area as it sits. We operate several flex routes in that area. And there's several factors that come into play. When we look at, as I talked about, our investment per rider for those services is very high. The ability for us to cover a lot of the area in this type of service is hard to do with traditional fixed route services. If you understand how the flex routes work, they operate on a normal route, but they do deviate up to 3/4 of a mile based upon advanced call-in. So if you look at what we can really cover in this area, we maybe cover about 29 square miles. By doing using these technologies and trying these type of services, we've expanded our coverage to a total of 65 square miles. The cost, when you compare the two, while it is more, it's not significantly more when you compare those operating costs. And so it's just a good test place where traditional fixed route services aren't necessarily working. There's continued demand and requests for more service in the area, and this just might be a different way for us to test it out.
This is the litmus test, right? To see if that demand, if they're saying, is real.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it allows us to connect to both tracks and front runner and see how those connections work. So it's a good area where it's difficult to get fixed route service in. We're already running flex, and is this an alternative to provide more coverage for more people to get to our core system?
Well, I can tell you that you're going to get a lot of people just in my community. They're going to use it to get to tracks to get to the airport, whereas it's a little bit prohibitive now to drive to tracks and park. I think it's going to. I think once it gets, it's definitely an option that they don't have now. So that's awesome.
Good. We'll see you tomorrow, some of us. I don't know how many want to attend, but I'm sure you've been invited to attend, so be great.
Great. Thank you.
And that concludes my agency report.
Thank you. Okay, we're on to the audit committee report. Troy and I attended that, and hopefully you've had a chance to look at that, what was sent out to you. But based on the bylaws established, the audit committee to meet the requirements of the statute, state statute, we've tried to follow that, or UTA's tried to, as a local area council, we've tried to implement that. And some of the talking points, the audit committee is required or to meet bi-monthly with our sixth and final meeting. It'll be in December. So we're just trying to adhere to the statute that was put in place. Process of the committee is to review and provide both transparency and accountability to ensure the risk assessments are in place and we can mitigate those the best we can. The 2019 internal audit plan is on track with minor modifications, primarily the maintenance of way audit being delayed to in 2020, the Q1. Well, they're in the reorganization mode right now. And the internal audit department is also under their own peer review. We expect that to be by the end of the year. So that's being done by, I believe UDOT's the peer review that's doing that. And we welcome that and encourage that, and I'm sure we'll get a good insight to how that department's running. So anything you want to add, Troy?
It's, I just think that our internal audit team is, focusing on the things they need to focus on, and as it builds, I think we're going to be better served than we've been before. But I think they're working hard to audit and give some confidence for everybody that has an interest in what UTA is doing. So,
All of us participate in a local community where audits are a standard for each city, and coming to UTA and being a participant of this, there's so many audits going on. It's like, oh my goodness. And those that are doing it are so excited about it. And for us that are operating in a city setting, kudos, keep going. Just very appreciative of that. Any questions or comments? No? Okay. Next on the agenda is the Advisory Council Chair Report, which falls on me. And we're trying to identify, in this first year, we've tried to understand based on the statute what our role is and how do we implement the directive that was given to us through the Senate bill. And I'd like to kind of maybe have a little discussion on that if you've had a chance to look at it. But it's really, after been through a year of this, what would we like to do differently, or areas that we'd like to focus more on based on the statute? And let me just kind of go over a couple of items. There's no action on this. It's more just a discussion. It was in the packet, solicit feedback. I mean, things that you like, dislike, areas that we can improve upon. Mayor Hills, any idea on that? Any concerns? We're trying to fill our way in this, so.
I received an online survey this morning. Maybe others did also.
Yeah.
And so there were some points in there that I tried to make.
Good.
I appreciate the local contact of the advisory committee. We have three wonderful trustees, but it's a far stretch to get them into the city council meetings, to the COGs and everything else, where the advisory committee has that touch at our fingertips. And this, for instance, the microtransit pilot, I think will answer many former objections to how UTA grew in the last 5 years, and those in the south end of the valley seem to think, especially southwest, they forgot us. We're not in the same world as them. Well, this is where you get to bring it back, and you expand the use of these vehicles and the fare setup, and you meet their needs better and better, get them used to using them. And I think that's the value of the advisory committee. We're closer. We're within a month of speaking with every one of the mayors. We can get their feedback and in turn pass it on to UTA.
So based on your participation, are you seeing a broader acceptance to have that discussion at the COG meetings?
Yes.
Which is good.
Definitely. It hasn't caught on like a house of fire. There are many other issues.
Government moves rather slowly in most cases, so.
You got it.
Yes.
But it's begun.
Yeah.
And as they see this, they may think, well, why can't we do that here or change it a little bit and make it more effective in another area? They're starting to see that it's UTA isn't made out of steel. It's really soft and velvety if you speak its language.
Wow, that's a quotable statement. That's amazing. Mayor Biskupski.
I don't know that I describe it quite that way, but that's lovely. I will say that I do believe the valley and the people in the valley are looking at UTA differently than they had in the past, and I think a lot of that has to do with the work of this group and how we are communicating back to our colleagues about the new structure and how things are operating, and I think it's building some trust that needed to be built. And I think as a group, we have an obligation to continue to share information and answer questions that come up through different meetings that we sit in our roles. And that will only further the benefit in the work of this organization. And then we all benefit from that.
I think people want to have a connection, and I think possibly this local advisory group can provide that on a very local level. People you know and trust and can get their ear and voice your concerns. So thank you. Well, just kind of, Eric, any insights or?
Just the one comment, and just to go along, I think it has connected at least our COG a little bit more towards having a point person to be able to address certain issues, and of course having Beth coming to the meetings and whatnot. It's just allowed for that availability and that communication to further, and I think it's been helpful. So continued, and like it's been said, I think this helps build confidence in the process and understanding. Education is going to always help them be more informed and feel part of what's going on, and I think that's moving forward. I think it just needs to continue. So.
Oftentimes the media, they get it right, but sometimes we get it in a little different point of view, and where we have the local connection, we have that opportunity to have that discussion based upon what's reported in the news, so we can clarify or give more in-depth information. So I think the conversation needs to continue, and hopefully we're facilitating that in a sense that we are.
Yeah, and I think a good example of that was that service coverage kind of debate that we were trying to deal with, that model, and taking it back to our individual cogs, getting that feedback and being able to have that. That was a good example, I think, of how this council can work.
And it varied from cog to cog.
Yes.
I
Oh,
mean,
yeah,
it
for
was
sure.
like, wow.
Yeah.
So it's not one suits the whole state or the different areas. It varies, so. You're probably okay, right?
Pretty much, I think that the fact that the education is being done out there, the southwest part of the valley is definitely
Turn your mic on.
looking for.
Hit your button. There you go.
The southwest part of the valley is definitely looking for some answers. But I think they can see that down the road it's coming to them. So all we gotta do is keep them happy.
Let's do that. Aaron, any insights?
From the areas, Box Elder and Tooele, I think that they appreciate being able to have a fast track way to get some of their concerns and some of their things that they like. I know the change day in August when Tooele, they were good to pass on the comments on that. So I think that it helps some of the mayors and county councils be able to feel like that they do have their fingers, available to make a difference.
You good? I mean, we're all saying pretty much the same thing, and I think that was the concept or the vision of the legislation, is to try to keep that local connection. So if you have any suggestions on things that we should change or areas that we need to focus on, please forward those to us, and we'll see what we can do to enhance those changes. We do have a meeting schedule that's on the agenda for next year. I'm trying to think. Do you have that listed? Let's see. It's proposed that it's up there now. Okay. This would be the meeting schedule for next year for the local advisory council. They're all on Wednesdays. Start time, unless something comes up and we need to modify that, the planned time is at 1 p.m. February 19th, May 27th, September 16th, and then November 11th. And I know that's kind of hard to plan out, but we do just, if you can put those on your calendars, those of you that will continue to be involved. Some of you, I'm sure, will stay involved, but may not have to be at those meetings. Yes. Okay. I wish I knew all the holidays. I know in the first part of November there is Veterans Day.
And so for context, but I think your feedback, if you want to veer from the Wednesday, is that we definitely are going to need your feedback on the tentative budget in November. Normally, we have been doing the third week, for these types of meetings, but the third week in 2020 is actually the UAC conference in St. George. So we wanted to be respectful of people who may be not available on the 18th, and then the next weekend is Thanksgiving. And so that's why the 11th was selected, which is Veterans Day. But if you have feedback that you'd prefer to not be on a Wednesday in November, we could look at a different date.
Well, we'll leave that open for, it's, okay.
You do it on top of you. Yeah, and with Carlton's great advice over here, we could do it on the UAC week. I'm looking at who's around the table right now, which would be the 18th of November. We do have a statutory requirement to set our calendar, so we do need today to at least have an action to set a calendar for 2020. Certainly, there can be modifications. So, your suggestions on either moving forward a week.
Eric, do you have?
Well, yeah, is there any reason why we wouldn't do it on like a Tuesday, the 10th? Let's move it up a day, like Robert Johnson.
The only other thing, it depends if you ever get a county commissioner, coming from one of the cogs, that would, but like if you did something on the 18th at 11, that gives them time to go down to St. George afterwards or something, or Tuesday, whichever you chose.
So I don't know, are we, okay.
Throwing it out.
Yeah. Well,
This far in advance, you know, hopefully everybody be a little flexible on that day of the week.
so the 18th, I mean, I assume we're probably okay with that because at this point, none of us are county commissioners. If I read the group right. So we need to make that an official action to change that, or this is just proposed.
I was just gonna say, I will take that and propose that we change that last date to the 18th, starting at 11, as Carlton mentioned, and then pass. We're not to that point yet, though. You're still in your thing.
I think we're okay. Yeah, we can go ahead and make a motion
You want
to,
to go down to that action?
yes.
Okay, that, I would include that as an action to change that to the 18th and that particular meeting starting at 11.
Okay, have a motion, a second. Any further discussion? Call for the vote. All in favor?
Aye.
I believe that was unanimous. Thank you. And some of the key objectives you'll notice in the agenda that we can look forward to in the 2020 would include adopting a 5-year service plan, updating the 5-year capital plan and budget, and developing the 2021 budget, and approving other capital and TOD projects. So that'll be on the horizon, somewhat similar to some of the things we've done this year. So I think we're about, tentative budget. You ready to go with that? Bob?
Yes, based on state statute, it does require consultation by the local advisory council on the agency's annual budget prior to approval of the Board of Trustees. Some of our key initiatives to date have been strategic planning for both sustainable growth and efficiency in our system. I know we're continuing to take a look at other sustainability programs within transit agencies and continue to try to be as efficient and as resourceful as possible. Aligning our systems improvements and expansions with the regional growth to meet the transit needs of current and future generations. We will be doing a long-range transportation plan, or transit plan, actually focused on, potentially the future fifth quarter and how we go out there and work with the counties, the cities, to determine sort of how we grow our system using the funding that may be coming in. So that'll be something, we haven't actually done that in a very long time, and this would be a longer range transit plan and how we would grow. Exploring innovative ways to increase mobility and access. You met Jaron. We will continue to do that. We're very much looking forward to seeing what the microtransit project will do in this area and continue to monitor that. We are constantly concerned about our workforce, turnover in our workforce, and succession planning. That's an effort that we are continuing to do. We do have the Service Choices study that has been out, and we'll be presenting some information to the board with some various scenarios soon. But we will be then creating the service plan that will be brought to this advisory council as well for adoption, which for the near-term service and how we move forward. Most of that change will be occurring. We expect that service plan to primarily go into effect in August 2021, but we need to be prepared about 8 months ahead before we implement. So we will be coming to, as well as any changes that we have for August 2020. And then, of course, we have our continued emphasis on our sort of our values, which is the UTA customer experience, safety and security. Safety is always a forefront for our agency as well.
Council, have you had a chance to look at the tentative budget and any questions or feelings on that? Bob, do you want to go ahead and move forward on anything that you, from your...
Well, I'm trying to move forward to the next slide.
Yeah,
There's
it's not
more,
going.
but it's not working.
Yeah. Something would be of interest to me in relationship to the tentative budget is we're coming up to, in the near future, a legislative session. Any insights you might be able to share and asks or concerns or things that we might be able to, as a local advisory council, as we go back to our local areas, that we could be in sync with the needs and interests that you might have as you go moving forward with that might be helpful. You may not be prepared for that, but that's just...
would just say, kind of briefly, we have a couple meetings today also with legislative leadership who are interested in and hope that, that they want to see a more robust transit solution in our service area. Obviously, there's a lot of competing interest and needs, and you throw tax reform in the mix, and that complicates it further. So, we're patiently working through that effort. But I think any large capital commitment would obviously come during the session, and at that point, when it's clear what the possibilities are, we would definitely welcome the assistance of the advisory council in petitioning for that investment on the behalf of the state. Sure.
Thank you, Carmen. You got the next screen? We're still working on it.
Sorry, we're apparently still working on it.
Let's try to buy some time. I've run out of time buyers.
Well,
You wanna-
hopefully you got a chance to see the charts as you came in today, and there'd be people who'd be willing to talk about the charts later on. You did receive hopefully the budget book, the tentative budget book, and if you needed help falling asleep at night, you had a chance to look at that.
Bob, you want to just continue on with the slides or the presentation?
Sure. So there are 4 priorities for the Board of Trustees. That includes state and legislative, and that is about improving relationships and being collaborative at the state and local level, and then following the governance model, fully implementing what was adopted with Senate Bill 136 and Senate Bill 72. As far as the local, it's fostering conversations. That's the next focus. Local, fostering conversations around shared outcomes and objectives, looking at community needs and economic development and strategic growth. And of course, that's a part that you will help play a role in. The next is the public realm, which is looking at service and the rider experience, matching up bus and trains so people aren't waiting out in the snow, for instance, things like that. And earlier the board heard about electronic signs and doing some work in that area to improve communication to the riding public. Then employee relations. None of this happens without a strong workforce. We're going to have 2,900 employees next year, and we definitely want to empower the workforce so they can do their jobs, make decisions out in the field where they need to make it. And then we also want to strengthen the workforce. There's a lot of training. This is very technical work in several areas, and so we need to make sure that our employees know what to do and that we're raising up a new crop of leaders within the organization. And then we're always looking toward continuous improvement. As far as budget highlights, we probably went over this with you before, but just to go over it again, we're adding frequency and extended hours for 3 core bus routes in Salt Lake City. And Salt Lake City's been very generous helping to fund those. We're looking at the Ogden-Weber State University BRT project. We're going into design next year, and I understand we're in line to get a grant and announced sometime next year, and so that would be the official launch of that project. You heard about the micro transit project in southwest Salt Lake County, and we'll also be doing more work on the airport tracks relocation as the airport gets closer to the point where we need to move our rail system. So next year is more design preparatory work, and then 2021, I believe, is when that actual expense is going to occur. No, I'm sorry, 13 million next year, 5 million after that. We're looking at double tracking in northern Utah County. We've been working with several agencies to get funding to do that work. We have a station going in at Vineyard, but we need to add some double tracking to allow for the trains to pass and to make that more effective. As far as some of the other initiatives that we have, we're dedicating almost $60 million towards state of good repair. We want to keep our infrastructure in good shape. We don't want to be like other transit agencies that have been in business a long, long time and have significant unfunded infrastructure needs. And so we're trying to keep on top of that and applying 60 million toward it. You talked about the service choices earlier in your meeting. We'll be working on that, trying to complete that, come up with what's the right mix, what do those routes look like, and then look toward implementing those changes. We continue to partner with communities on first and last mile options. We're still working on our Tiger grant. That was a 5-year project, and so we continue to work with our communities who are helping to fund some of those first last mile options. If you look behind the building, you can see most of the prior building where the depot district is going to go is gone. So there's a little more demolition work to be done, and the board in their meeting earlier today approved expansion of the Big D contract to start building some of the facilities that are going to go back there and be around the main facility. So that work is progressing, and that's important because our garage across the street is limited to the number of buses it can hold in service. And by putting in the depot district, we expand the capability of buses by about 50%. And we also are putting in the clean fuel technologies that allow us to do more clean fuel vehicles out of this particular garage. We'll be working on developing a comprehensive wayfinding and signage plan. Things that I never would have thought about, such as special poles that would allow people who can't see to identify it's our pole and that it's a bus stop. So there's just things like that that our team is doing a great job thinking through the things that have to be done for wayfinding. Of course, we want to prioritize workforce development. That's just key. We have to have good, talented people at every position here. And then we want to enhance our customer and community communications. No? Okay.
There appears to be a network outage.
Okay. So, the charts are out there. It's a $491 million operating budget and about $190 million capital budget. There's just been a few changes from the numbers that we talked to you about in September. Brad, maybe you can bring in the pie charts. So I can talk about a couple of the changes that have happened since we talked to you in September. One is we actually sold the 2019 bonds, and so we now know what our debt service is from those bonds, the savings as well as the new money cost. And so we've made those changes. We've updated the 2020 wages and benefits. We put in some numbers that were just placeholders, and now we've come down to what we think the numbers are really going to be, and so we've made those adjustments. We've added 3 FTE and commuter rail maintenance. With the addition of a 10th frontrunner train, we're finding that we need to have more people to make sure the trains get turned around and maintained. We're adding 1 FTE in civil rights. We've added some FTE for some Salt Lake operations and maintenance changes. We've added some services in government relations and some software in the board office for coordination, customer relationship management to achieve some efficiencies there. And then the legal department reduced their outside legal services by $300,000. So let's see, if you go over here and look at the pie chart over here, that's the operating revenues. Not much is, actually nothing's changed on that pie. Wait a second. Sorry, I wanted to make sure I was referring to the right thing. So that's the operating revenues, again, $491 million. You can see 70% of it is sales tax. And one of the changes we're making between now and the final budget is I've taken a look at our sales tax as it's come in. This number reflected a 3.5% increase this year. We're recommending going to 3.8% for this year. Some of my projections have us coming in at 4, but I want to be a little conservative. So that'll be a change when you see the final budget. It's about $900,000 increase in next year's revenues. None of the other numbers have really changed from when you saw them in September. Over here is the, it says operating revenue. Yeah, okay, it's use of operating revenue. So it's the expense side of the operation. Outside of the few changes that I mentioned, it added about $900,000 to the total amount of the expense. So 900,000, you know, we increase some revenue, we'll increase some expense here. But the allocations between those are essentially the same. When you look at the final budget, debt service will go up just a little bit, and we'll be adding some contingency dollars. I just want to make sure that we have some funds in case specifically we get some additional grants. On this slide over here, we've got the capital budget, revenue and expense. There hasn't been any change from the information that we presented to you in September. Again, we've seen an increased diversity in our capital budget revenues, and our staff, as you heard today, works really hard to increase that pie called grants. And okay, that's the expense side. So the revenues are over here, and so they work really hard to increase that particular amount of money. And then now what's being displayed, oh, that's revenue. Can I go back to expense now? I know, I'm moving fast. So this is the expense side. And again, nothing has changed on this from what we presented to you. We're trying very hard to allocate those funds to address the needs of things that need to be done. You can see the depot maintenance facility, about $40 million next year. Airport tracks, I did get it right, $13 million. And then the Ogden BRT, about $28 million. And then $59 million for state of good repair. And then the other capital projects that would include things like Northern Utah double tracking. That's about $10 million. Yes, it is. It's about 10 million. Northern Utah County. That's what we're calling it. Yes. Correct. So that's in there. As well as the additional funding for the Ogden Weber State BRT. We wanted to make sure, the board wanted to make sure that that funding wasn't in question. And so they went ahead and made those changes. Questions about that before I head into next steps? Okay.
We're good.
Well, where we go from here is December the 11th. We'll present the final budget to the board. And again, I've gone over most of the major changes from this to what the final budget's going to be, of what will all be presented. And so the board will discuss that on the 11th and then take action on December 18th.
And Troy, you need to get used to that Northern Utah County thing because they're looking to do a BRT as well, so.
And obviously, if you have any questions, once you've read through the tentative budget book, we're always available to answer questions.
That smile is very big. How many times have you, well, I won't ask you how many times you read through it, but we would do well to follow your example, right? Read through it.
Well, I didn't read through it quite enough. We had to make a correction. A page got left out.
Okay.
So there was a correction after we sent the original one out.
Okay, any discussion on that? I believe we do need to make a motion to approve the tentative budget.
Mr. Chair, I move we approve the tentative budget as presented.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That was unanimous. Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. And maybe I'll try to read through it one more time. Yeah. Other business, our next meeting is February 19th, 2020. And is anything that need to be brought forward as council members? We good? Thank you for serving. We appreciate your support of transit, and from a city's perspective, not only verbally supporting, but moving forward with money to fund that. That's a good example.
Mayor, will you use your mic, please?
You know, it's truly making a difference. I don't know if people understand the significance of one of our routes, but we have a lot of students that are bused from the west side to East High School. And for the first time ever, those kids can stay longer than 4 p.m. after school and fully participate in their school programs. And that is a game changer, not only for those kids, but their families and our entire city. And I'm very grateful to my team and the partnership with UTA to make that happen.
You will be missed, and I know that you will continue to have a voice. So appreciate that. Okay, our next item is to adjourn. Someone want to call?
So moved.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
We're done. Thank you.